Good afternoon. Welcome back to NTV. And this afternoon we'll be talking about something to do with parents and sexuality education. Now, the Ministry of Education and Sports here in Uganda developed the National Framework on Sexuality Education through wide consultations with a cross-section of stakeholders. Launched by the First Lady, Mama Janet Museveni, in 2018, the framework seeks to create an overarching national direction for providing young people with sexuality education in line with, number one, the existing national policies and commitments. Number two, Vision 2040. Number three, the Presidential Fast Track Initiative to end HIV and AIDS as a public threat by 2030. Number four, the National Development Plan. And number five, the National HIV Strategic Plan. Now, finally, this was also skewed towards making sure that the education sector is in line with this strategic plan. Now, as we look at this kind of details now, it is from this background, therefore, that this afternoon, courtesy of the Reproductive Health Uganda and Reach a Hand Uganda, working with the Ministry of Education and Sports, we are delving into the not so comfortable conversation on sexuality education and how parents, yes, like me, can be supported to conduct sexuality education among their children at home. Now, the theme this afternoon of this particular e-conferencing is supporting parents to play their role in sexuality education in this semi- and post-COVID-19 lockdown period here in Uganda. Now, we are live, just for you to take note, we are live across all the NTV platforms, of course, including social media. We are also live on 93.3 KFM, live on 93.9 Namirembe FM, and this e-conferencing is also being hosted on Zoom. We are heavy on social media, like I said, on hashtag Sexuality Education UG. Welcome aboard. My name is Malaki Vilaudera, founder, CEO of Silmax Consult, and the moderator for this afternoon. My panelists this afternoon in studios, I'll be joined by Mr. Ismail Mulindwa, Director, Basic and Secondary Education and Head of the Health and HIV Unit from the Ministry of Education and Sports. I'll also be joined by Reverend Moses, of course, ordained church minister in the Anglican Church of Uganda. Joining me this afternoon also will be Amanya Faith Batega, a parent and a senior community development officer here in Uganda. I'll also be joined by James K. Tumusime. He is a manager, gender and youth at Reproductive Health Uganda. Finally, I'll be joined by Miss Annette Nanfuke, curriculum specialist at the National Curriculum Development Center and CDC. So in studios, I'll be having three panelists. Of course, we'll be having in studio, like I said, Mr. James Tumusime seated next to me. Like I said, again, just to give you his title, manager. He is a manager of gender and youth at Reproductive Health Uganda. Many thanks. Welcome.
Thank you, Miss.
All right. Next to him, I do have Miss Annette Nanfuka. She is a curriculum specialist at the National Curriculum Development Center. Many thanks. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
All right, thank you. On the farthest end, I'm being joined this afternoon by Mr. Ismail Mulindwa, Director, Basic and Secondary Education and the Head of Health and HIV Unit from the Ministry of Education and Sports. Many thanks and good afternoon.
Welcome.
Thank you. All right, I think I'll just start with you from the farthest end as we come this way. We are having the big theme, and I think this is a conversation that most of us are not so comfortable with, and therefore we don't have such conversations often. And I'm happy that you're having this conversation this afternoon. So over to you, Mr. Ismail Mulindwa, sexuality education. I remember when it was launched by Madam Janet Museveni, Ministry of Education, of course, there was a lot of backlash, guys saying, are you now trying to teach our children about sex? I want you to get down again from the basics as we start off this conversation. Define for us what sexuality education is with a clear understanding that it's different from sex education. Over to you.
Thank you, presenter. You are right that I make clarification right from the onset, because many people have misunderstood the concept of sexuality education. and disappointingly, even our colleagues in the media have always been referring to it as sex education. I want to draw the lines between sex education and sexuality education. And I'll be broad in my definition. Sexuality education is the being of an individual as a man and as a woman. That tells you somebody's sexuality perspective. And when we talk about sexuality education, we want just to give that knowledge which concerns you as an individual, as a girl, as a boy. What is it that makes you a boy? And why do you behave in a certain kind of way? This goes with your sexuality education, because when you talk of sexuality education, people think it is the sex part of it. But the way you talk, the way you smile, the way you interact with people tells your sexuality part of it. Mm-hmm. Like, for example, look at, for example, my voice here is different from yours.
Correct.
Yeah? That is against sexuality. The way you move, even in public, tells you your sexuality perspective. Yeah? As a woman, as a lady. The way you interact with people, in our cultures here, you need even to kneel. That tells part of your sexuality. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about sexuality education, we are not confining ourselves to, or we are not talking about the sex education as people normally want to portray it. We are talking about the wholesomeness of an individual.
Right.
Eh? As a male, as a female.
Okay.
You see? So I'm just answering in perspective. I hope you're able to pick what I mean. But sexuality education is different. Now you are talking about either the act or sex education. It may talk about the act, but talk about even the sex of an individual, either male or female. You get the point, eh? So the two should not be mixed up.
Okay.
Yeah, sex education, that's the act part of it. And we are not, by the way, for that one.
Right.
So as a ministry, our focus on looking at an individual, teaching and the wholesomeness, the way, the functionality of an individual as a male, as a female. So want to give that kind of education, okay, so that you know the confines of where your sex takes you.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I'll join in with Miss Annette right there, because you also from government, national curriculum, so to speak, and you're a specialist there. This is a rollout that will be in our schools. Our children will be taught about sexuality education. It's going to be pretty much embedded in our curriculum, for lack of a better word. I remember when there was this backlash, the huge message was that as much as it's sexuality education and not sex education, it will be dispensed in an age-appropriate manner. So I want you to speak to that before we get to helping parents on how to now have these conversations with their parents, with their children, beg your pardon. How did the curriculum, how did you people as specialists in the national curriculum coin or are still working on it? It's still, a work in progress. How did you make sure that it's coined in a way that it's indeed age appropriate, just to give our parents that reassurance?
Thank you, moderator. To pick it from where Director Malindwa has said, is sexuality education, it's just a body of knowledge, information, which is age appropriate, skills, values that are intended to be passed on to a person. It's a lifelong process, because we are changing every day. We try a body of knowledge that will, and information and skills that will enable a child to answer the questions like, who am I? Where am I going? And how do I get there? Right. So just like director said, that I have to understand myself as a girl and at a certain age. And the information that is supposed to be given me at that age should be appropriate for that particular age. What is intended to be given to a 5-year-old is different from what is given to a preteen, to a teenager, to a child, I call all of them children,
yes,
to one who is pre-university, then university, so that they are able to live comfortably, to make the right decisions about they themselves as people. We find that we have discovered that a number of children fail to make decisions because they don't know. At home, maybe for the time being, the parents are with their children. But most of the time, children spend the time at school. So if we do not bring in these ideas or this kind of education to the children, then our children are likely to lose out.
Right.
So for us at NCDC, we realize that there are so many key skills that children need in line with who they are, where they are going, and how to get there.
Okay.
So we identified key subjects. We do not have it as a subject. We have key subjects where some of these issues can be talked about. And maybe to give just a little detail.
Right.
What is it that we talk about that should not scare the parent out there? We talk about issues like hygiene. We know that me as a girl, as I grow, there will be a specific time that my body starts to change. How do I keep hygienic? How am I supposed to feed? How am I supposed to take care of myself in case for example, it is public knowledge, everybody knows it, that children at a certain time, at a certain age, definitely get into menstrual cycles. And some of them begin when they are at school.
Correct.
The mothers, the parents are not there. So we need to get such little information into our curriculum to prepare the children.
Right.
Now, that information is given not to a 5-year-old, not to a 7-year-old, but maybe 9 onwards. But remember, it is for both boys and girls. That information is both for boys and girls. So we have identified subjects where such key issues can be integrated within the bigger picture of a subject.
All right, thank you so much for that submission. I think it's you've nailed it on the head. But of course, we'll be getting back to you for you to give us examples of, so what do I tell a child who's between 0 and 5? What do I tell a child between 5 and 10? What do I tell a child who's in their teenage period? What do I tell a child who's beyond that? Because they're children who are in their 20s and they still live with us and they need our guidance, right? All right, over to you, Mr. James. Reproductive Health Uganda has been at the forefront of ensuring that there's this information being dispensed to every single young person. And you've been spearheading different projects and, of course, initiatives to ensure that all our children, of course, in schools, at home, wherever they are, have this information. I want you to speak to what it is that you do, of course, for that viewer who's interacting with Reproductive Health Uganda for the first time, and then maybe we can take it out from there with the different initiatives that you've been able to roll out before we now, take over the conversation to another scope.
Thank you very much, Mala. I am happy to be in NTV studios once again.
Thank you.
Not to differ from what the first two speakers have said, I'll take the subject further home. One of the things that bothered me while growing up is at the age of 16, I began to see beards on my face. I was in a mixed school, and many of my peers did have beards, so it was something that was very hard for me to deal with. And one of the most interesting times was when I went to see my mother, and unfortunately we met on the road before I reached her. And my mother passed me because I looked much older than her son. So I got very disturbed, and I wrote several letters to Straight Talk Foundation at the time to answer what is it that is wrong with me. I went to my biology teacher, I asked many questions. Not to take the story far, by the time I reached the university, I had begun to develop a bald head. Now, that was something that in my understanding was for very old people. So these questions shaped many things around how I carry myself. They shaped many things about what I read, because I had to delve a lot and understand what are these happening to me. So the sexuality education question seems to be something that everyone experiences their own way, and for us, I think our role is to demystify it as much as possible. I thank the programs by then because they answered some of my questions, and perhaps it influenced many other good things about me. Talking about Reproductive Health Uganda, we are a non-governmental organization that I think is one of the oldest. We are the second oldest in the country. We've been here since 1957. We used to be called the Family Planning Association of Uganda. And our work has mainly been around spearheading the discussion, spearheading the services, working for reproductive health and rights in this country, addressing the different needs of different people in their life course. We work with people that are still in their womb because we provide antenatal services to mothers. We support delivery. We do child growth monitoring. We work with teenagers, giving them this kind of information I'm talking about. We work with people that have become expectant after their life course and they are looking for partners, etc., to support them, give them the right counseling, give them information on how to keep themselves healthy and safe, and eventually transit into adults that go back to the cycle. So in simple, we do from cradle to grave, simply put. And in this subject of sexuality education, I think our role has mainly been to bring the stakeholders that matter in this discussion together. Like you can rightly see, we are with the Ministry of Education, we are with the National Curriculum Development Center, we are with the faith-based leaders, we are with other civil society organizations, but importantly, we are also with the parents and the media. Everyone adds a key block on this discussion of sexuality education because of where they view it from.
Right.
When you're going to be a health worker, I work in a more health-centered environment, you will view sexuality education from the challenges that you see every day of young people who are becoming pregnant and dropping out of school and suffering the effects thereafter. When you're doing child growth monitoring and you see that the children born to very young parents are struggling to live through their first 5 years. When you're working in a setting like I do and you see people who really need health services cannot afford them, we have a subsidy policy where we provide services to people that cannot afford to pay. But majority of these people are people that are either young mothers and suffering. So this informs our perspective around what sexuality education should look like. Okay. So that is really some of the little work that I could describe, but yes, as we go on, I'll tell you a lot more of what we do. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Back to Mr. Ismail Mulindwa. You head a very important unit in the Ministry of Education, and that's the, you're the head of the Health and HIV and AIDS unit at the Ministry of Education, a very pertinent and sensitive unit. Before 2018 and the launch of the sexuality education, what are some of these drivers that the Ministry of Education was, noticing in our school-going children and saying that we can't continue to hide our heads in the sand, we must do something about it and launch something that will make a turnaround or cause a turnaround and a shift in the way our young people view sexuality and all these other conversations. So what was the reality on ground before 2018 and the launch of the same?
Thank you, presenter, before 2018, I wanted first of all to clarify on an issue raised in our first session, where you said there was a lot of anxiety and there was a lot of backlash and that kind of thing. Eh?
Right.
Maybe I need to give you some information around that issue before I come to the point you are raising. That we, of course, any new intervention attracts a lot of attention. People get interested, people want to know what's the package. And prior to 2018, we had made quite a number of consultations with our different stakeholders, the religious people, the media,
Correct.
the civil society organizations, and many others, the teachers, and that led to that sexuality education. But like I've pointed out, being a new kind of intervention and by the ministry, people, of course we couldn't reach that last person. We of course consulted through their organizations. So when the backlash started now surfacing, we said no, we need to address this. And what we did, again working with the Protective Health Uganda, we said, can't we go for another kind of re-engagement? Because you remember very well, even our constitution, the date was launched, some other people, there were some dissenting kind of views. And I remember some people even said, no, we are not signing. Because they didn't know then what was contained within that constitution. But of course, with time, they got to know, and now we are moving. So it's the same thing with our framework. So we have gone for another kind of round to explain, because the whole thing was that people did not know what was even within this framework. And as people got to know, they started even appreciating and saying, oh, is this what is in this? Because the picture painted then was around the first thing I explained around the sex education. Every time we would see, even in the media, sex education. So when they got to know it is sexuality education, and they got to know what is contained within this framework, they started appreciating. So we went for another round. We had, of course, an interaction and consultations with our other stakeholders, and now people are appreciating. And you don't now hear those dissenting kind of voices, because people have understood, have read, and they have understood, right? Now to go back to your to your issue, what informed our decision? Quite a number of issues. One, as a ministry, we're in charge of millions of learners, and these are young people at a tender age. So at that time, even as we talk now, there's been some kind of improvement, but we still have a lot to do. We are looking at our statistics. How many are enrolled in school? How many are able to transit up to the next level? And the data we are picking was so bad, so disappointing, to a point that you would know, for example, 100 girls at P1, and we want to track them and see if they are completing it to up to P7. And surprisingly, many of them would drop along the way. And we would ask ourselves, what is causing this? And specifically for the girl child, many were getting married off.
Correct.
And at an underage. Many were getting pregnant. And they would drop out of what? Drop out of school. Many would even contract this deadly disease like HIV. We have many, again, who are forced out of school just because of HIV. There was a lot of violence, sexual-based violence. And we said, no, we can't hide our heads into the what? Into the sand. Because our ultimate goal is to have that girl moving from P1 up to university.
Correct.
Now, when you start dropping them along the way, you need to get concerned. So we got concerned. They are getting pregnant, they are contracting HIV, they are being married off at an age, they are being sold, by the way, by their own parents at times, who do sell them to those big men, and they are married. So we say, no, can't we come out with some kind of a framework which would really guide, give skills, so that these little girls can even be able to say no.
Right.
If you have been observant, many of our girls, when you go to schools, you talk to somebody and she can't talk you straight in your face. You see her doing this, doing this, doing this. Eh? But when you talk, when you go to some other countries, you talk to a girl. I'll give an example. I'm not saying they are doing best. Eh? You go to countries like South Africa, you are talking to a young lady. Even in Kenya here, she's looking into your face. But our girls here have got that weakness. And why? Because they don't have those skills that would make them be firm on their decisions. The teacher is telling you, take my books to my house. Should be able to stand and say, Mr. Teacher, okay, sorry, let me take them to the staff room instead of taking them to your house.
Right.
So those skills, we said, can't we come up with a framework which can provide those skills? Okay. And a no becomes a what? Becomes a no. And in that 2017, I got an opportunity to go to Vietnam. I visited Vietnam. And somebody presented a report, and it was even highlighting some of the countries in Africa which had got a very high pregnancy rate. Right. And he mentioned Uganda, and he mentioned 25%.
25%.
I said, is this one happening back in my country? And I came with a lot of zeal. But of course, there are some other issues. You remember that time we had an issue with our schools again, where some materials were taken to our schools, which are unacceptable, because they were carrying a lot of contractual kind of messages. Right. So Parliament prevailed and said, no, come up with a framework. But even before Parliament's resolution, we had started on this work because of the reasons which I've already given. Right. So those many factors force us to sit down, put our heads together with our partners, including Reproductive Health Uganda and many others. Right. Rita and Uganda and many others. We said, no, let's come up with this framework. Right.
And of course, I'll be getting back to you with regards to that aspect that you just mentioned. These are the books that were sneaking into our schools, and our children were, getting this information that was not right. Exactly. So we'll be getting into what is the Ministry of Education doing to ensure that they stop that, because it's countering what you're trying to achieve with the sexuality education in our schools. Miss Annette, someone once said that, and I think this also is something that the NCDC resonates with, that the primary implementer of this sexuality education is the parent. Because most of the times we are with our children in school, at home. The teachers are just with them in school for a short period of time. There's a lot to cover in terms of the curriculum with other subjects as well, so they can only do so much. So in terms of the curriculum, I want you to point out to the aspect that you are able to put in that caters to enlightening or educating the parent on how to go about this. Because for most of us, it's something new.
Thank you, Mala. I really believe that, yes, what you're saying is, but we have found that most of the time, the biggest percentage of the time, the children are in school. So that is why we're doing it. But what is it that a parent can do? We realize that when we develop curriculum materials, they mainly target the teacher, the ministry, but then the parents are also stakeholders. But it may not be so easy for a person who is not in that particular line to actually interpret, but there are guidelines. But before we even go there, I think we as parents, this is our God-given mandate. And the reason why why this mandate is shifting to the schools is because most of us as parents have ignored our role and shifted it to the school. But it should be actually our own mandate, we as parents. Now I'm talking as a parent, because this is a person you bring into this world. You happily receive the child, you breastfeed or take care of that child, but then there comes a time when we start distancing ourselves because we do not want to talk about certain things. All right? So we must take it upon ourselves as parents to know our role, so that we can mentor these children, because this is something basic. A child at 3 years, if it is a girl, you tell them, sit properly. That is sexuality. Do not move naked before the public. Right? When you go to bathe, this is how you should do it. So, and as a child grows, it may not be in a curriculum that is part of the framework or part of the curriculum, but it is our role as parents to guide, mentor, and see these children get to the top, so that as they learn how to make decisions. But we are supposed to do that. When it comes to a child like, because you may ask yourself, what is it that I should tell to the 5-year-old? It is there. Tell them, your body in general is your body, okay? You should not do this. And it should be part of our conversation. The only problem we have in the modern world, especially for us who live in the modern setting, TV has shifted to becoming the parent.
Right.
And we as parents, feel that, I need my distance, I need my time. So they are not given enough time. But it should not be what we in the curriculum have developed, but you as a parent should know that you're the core person to tell that very sensitive issue to your child. Because, and another maybe important thing is that we have failed to befriend our children. If you befriend your child right from the beginning, they'll be able to open up to you. Let us not bring these issues as do's and don'ts. Let them be part of our conversation as the children grow up. We talk about them. We do not put ultimatums, but just part of a conversation, so that by the time I realize that maybe I'm a boy and I'm developing a beard, I'll be able to ask my mom, Mommy, but what is this? What is... So it is not the National Curriculum Development Center to do certain things, but it should be, we should learn that we as parents, you, the young parents, learn that the closer you are to your child, the easier it will be for you to interact with your child. Tell them what you don't want the others to tell them, and you will then you will be working together with us to raise children who are assertive, who can make decisions, who are aware of themselves.
Right. And I think that the question that is coming through is, okay, fine, we have the curriculum set. But the big concern, and I think Mr. Ismail would agree with me, coming from different stakeholders and parents alike, is the implementation of the same. So I wanted to speak to the implementation and how parents can collaborate with the teachers to ensure that the dispensation of the same is at 100% in terms of effectiveness with our children. So how is the curriculum, coming in line to ensure that the implementation of the same, it's multi-pronged efforts coming together, both from the curriculum, developers like you, to the implementers who are in school, the teachers, to the implementers who are at home, the parents. How can parents go about collaborating?
Thank you. A number of times, like currently, we rolled out the Senior 1 curriculum. And we work together, of course, with our mother ministry. We first of all, train the teachers and tell them the new things that have been integrated within the curriculum, including this issue of other cross-cutting issue, because this is not the only cross-cutting issue that has been put in the curriculum. And we have also made effort to reach out to parents, sometimes in the, what do they call them? Parent-teachers meetings. We go and speak to them. But we also have representatives, parent representatives on the PTA. Usually they come. We reach out to them. But now as parents, we have what has been put in the curriculum, especially this that we have just rolled out. It involves a lot of interaction with the parents, with the community, with the teachers. So when some of those, in areas where we have integrated some of those areas, we actually encourage, or we put that you go, the activities that the learners are supposed to be involved in, we send them, require them to go and ask either religious leaders or parents, and we do expect the parents to do what? To cooperate, because normally there are such activities that we include are those that we know can be interpreted by whether literate or illiterate parents.
Okay.
So we expect the parents to work together with us on certain issues, whether illiterate or semi-literate or very illiterate. Those areas are there, and we do expect the learners to interact with the parents and get back to the school.
Okay. Mr. James, I'd like you to come in on this one before I link to our one of the virtual panelists, Ms. Faith Batega. The rollout is here with us. We thank God it's finally a solution to the issues that we've been facing. You know, when you, like Mr. Ismail Mulindo said, you attend some of these international conferences and they throw figures about Uganda and you're like, what is that? You know, them saying, of course, some of the statistics pointing out to in the sub-Saharan region, Uganda leads in teenage pregnancies, 25%, like we mentioned earlier on. You are on ground with the different initiatives and programs that you have as Reproductive Health Uganda, in terms of the success rate of the same. For the few months that you've gone on, where would you put the execution at?
The execution of?
Of the sexuality education.
Thank you. Thank you, Mala. I think that's interesting. You see, I think the previous speakers have also elaborated on this. Whereas we have a framework and a new curriculum that have come into place now, the execution of sexuality education is a lifelong process that has been happening well before these guidance from the government of Uganda have come in. We have seen the church, the mosque, and all other faith leaders continuously do this in different ways at different times from the past up to today. We've seen teachers. When I went to school, it was mainly through the core career subjects, and there were some aspects missing, but it was happening. So with the new guidance that the government has come in, I think the new guidance is trying to study the problem as it is today and contextualize the information that our young people need to be getting and how, where they are not only people that are there to receive and be told, but they are there that they participate in creating the knowledge that they are given. They participate in answering the questions of, am I well? Who am I? You know, in the past there were attempts to answer such questions in a homogeneous fashion, and that missed many people. Even today, such efforts, you know, straight throwing into the fire, what are the issues today that we are trying to break up is we have had very big campaigns in the country that focus on teaching people how to abstain, and these have been very successful campaigns in their own right. But from what the Ministry of Education has submitted, and even in the documents of our country, Mr. Mulindo has rightly told you that 25% of people that are pregnant are actually teenagers. And many times all of them are married, are pregnant outside wedlock and outside official marriages. That means that the messaging around abstinence either did not work for them or it phoned when it is too late for them. So it is not easy for me to say that this is the success rate or this is how far we have gone in implementing this new framework and the new curriculum. But I think to me what is important is that it is a gradual process. It recognizes different categories of learners. Things that cannot be addressed through the Ministry of Education have been referred to the ministries such as the Ministry of Health, where they can be rightly addressed. For the learners that could have, for example, either been caught after they have crossed the bridge or they are about to cross the bridge and the waters can no longer hold. So there is a lot of learning that has to be done. There is a lot that has to be done by the faith leaders in understanding this framework, because they are one of the biggest groups of people that have unquestioned hearing, and it's so free and regular.
Right.
We have people like you, the media, have to pick out what works for them. You know, for example, Mala, you have a certain audience of people that follow you. I know you have a very strong social media following. Who are these people that follow you? Many of them are young people. What are the needs of this particular group of people? The people that follow you are not the rural young girls in my village. They are the town folk who are having a whole lot of issues that they are dealing with, whom you can influence if you have got your own share of the framework and you've understood it. What can the teacher influence? What can the teacher learn? The teacher in the past has also suffered on HIV. The teacher has suffered on issues of pregnancy.
Right.
The teacher has suffered also as a person. So the teacher needs to be supported by whoever can to first of all understand these issues, internalize them and appreciate them on their own self, then be able to find effective ways to communicate with the audience that they intend to communicate to. If a teacher is teaching people that are below their teen years, I think Annette has rightly explained what the kind of information they can pass on could be, the bodily integrity of the child. If a teacher finds themselves trapped in classes where they're dealing with teenage children, asking themselves lots of questions, the teacher should be able to answer issues of basic reproductive health that these people are struggling with, issues of relationships that these people are struggling with. And this is not a journey in the park. This is not something that you achieve over a short period of time. The critical actor, who is the parent has never been trained by anyone to be a parent.
Yeah.
You know, it is easy to become a parent, but parenting is a deliberate process, a deliberate set of principled things that you do to be available for your children, to know that they are doing this and they are doing that. These are their schedules, etc. If you've seen in the lockdown period that I want us to focus on, the issues of parents who are discovering things about their children that they did not even know existed. Not that they were not parents, they have been parents, but they have never parented to the level that they should have done. So I would want someone out there to exonerate the people in the big spaces of the Ministry of Education, in the NCDC. These people are not inventing anything. These people are simply saying, people, we are taking this road, but we are missing where the issues are. Can we all come and focus our eyes there? That kind of discussion, I think, is what I want. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your submission. At this point in time, we'd like to link to Miss Faith Betega. She is a parent and also a senior community development officer right here in the country. Miss Faith, just to let you in, you know, they always say that the only time a child is themselves, no pretense, everything put down and they're themselves at 100% is when they're at home. And during this COVID period, it's been an eye-opener to most of parents, me included, of course, to just see, oh, so this is what my child can do. Oh, so this is exactly who my child is. I just wanted to speak to that reality right now and where parents can start in terms of playing their role in sexuality education, so to speak, because most of the times we were up and running, but now we are at home. So if it's a parent who's been absent, where can they start?
Thank you, moderator. Like my friends have said, the lockdown was unprepared and was a time that I, as a parent, I have interfaced a lot with my children. I really thought I was doing enough, but having them for more than 60 days was a time that I have enjoyed as a parent to really understand who my children are. I have children ranging from the university to primary level, but at the time they used to have holidays were too short enough for me. I was working and I thought I knew them all. But the time I've been with them, it has made me explore more because we, as a family, we relate a lot. I've been asking them who they are, their bodies, because we freely share. But I have come to understand that maybe I knew them a little percentage because for these days we've been at home. I have a boy and the girls, the way we relate, the way we've been answering issues around sexuality, the issue about their bodies, who they are, where they are going, is something that the parents really, really must look at. Most times we think it's the role of government. I am saying the parents have to contribute more than 90% because the children really appreciate what they get from their parents and they really think that's the truth. But most times we've left this work to the institutions. I have thoroughly discussed with especially my girls. And when we are discussing every day, keep on laughing. They think, well, this is a different one. Maybe they think it's of somebody else. So in respect of who they are, their bodies, what they want to be, the life skills, I found it rather challenging. And I think it was an opportune time for us as parents to think through, because most times we blame our children when they've fallen into the bridge, yet when we are partly a cause. So I have explored more. I've made them appreciate who they are. Girls have different likes, how maybe they feel with their bodies, whom they think a handsome boy is, maybe who a boy thinks a handsome girl is. And we have deeply shared, and they have come to appreciate that there is a lot to undergo through. And as a parent, I have seen where I have not done well, and it has been a time for me to reflect. So I have to reset the table to ensure that I engage them more. And even the younger one, I think, will be to the advantage, because maybe the university students, I'm talking to them at another level. But I thought I was doing well as a community development officer, and it is time that the parents really get out of their comfort zones to engage their children so that they are able to be responsible citizens.
Thank you, Faith. Thank you, Faith, for your submission. Many thanks for making time to join us. Of course, we'll be getting back to you. But back in studios, Mr. Ismail, I want you to now speak as a parent. And also, you can put on your crown as coming from the Ministry of Education. Also another statistic that is quite worrying is that 1.4 million Ugandans are living with HIV and AIDS. That's including the young people, children as well. As a parent, of course, Ms. Faith pointed out to the fact that these children are growing by the day. They're having different experiences on a day-to-day basis. But I want you to speak to the role of a father. Because most of the times when you're talking about sexuality education, disciplining children, having the not so comfortable conversations, it's a role that has been, given to the mamas alone, the mothers. But what's the role of a father in the execution and implementation of this?
And thank you, Presenter. And that's where we are missing a point. The thinking, especially in our different cultures here, there should be the mother to address issues of sexuality education of their children. In fact, in some families, they divide the roles. A mother looks at the girl child and the father looks at the boy child, which I think is wrong. You should be a parent, not a father, not a mother, but a parent who can really help out even a girl child, even if you were a man. Like, for example, me, I'm, I think, a complete father, if I would say. My girls, If the mother is maybe somewhere doing some work, they come straight to me and say, Daddy, can we have money want to go and buy? And I give the money.
Right.
It's a normal kind of thing. And me, when I reach home, I hug, like she said, you need to be friend. I hug my girls, I do what. And when you find me chatting with them, you can't even believe it. I touch them, I do what. So they are that close. And that's where I said we are missing a point. We are not friends to our children.
Mm-hmm.
We are not parents at the same time. Because if you are not a friend to your child, it's very difficult for you to become a parent. Because a parent has got responsibilities you need to take up. There are certain things you need to do for your children. But if your children are far apart from you, then it will be very difficult even to know what they are,
Right.
what they need, their needs, their challenges, their problems. You will never get to know. And for that matter, you will not be what? A parent. Because the parent is supposed to provide.
Right. But Mr. Mulindio, how far should a father go? Because that's also another conversation, especially in our African context, whereby it's even mothers who support for fathers not to be directly involved in raising up children in that way, in terms of their sexuality and all that. Because, and I understand where most of us Africans come from, whereby you'd find a family whereby a girl was impregnated by the father. So I want you to speak to the reality. How far should a father go in terms of trying to establish friendship with his children, especially them of the opposite sex?
No, of course, I wouldn't say it is limited to a certain point. It depends on what type of father. However, there are limitations. There are boundaries where you can go. Like, I'll give an example, a plain example. If your children are bathing, taking a shower, you may not go that far to maybe guide on how to bathe, on how to wash, and that kind of detail. A mother can do it better. You see? But there are some other aspects which are general, like the one I've given. If my girl wants a certain wear, there's no reason why I can't provide. I can go that far. And incidentally, me, I'm a biology teacher. There are some other details which I can even discuss with my child.
Right.
Like, for example, there are changes. If my girl is growing up and there are some changes, there's no reason why I cannot even explain some of these changes to my girl. You see? But that said, like I said again, there are limitations. There are certain roles which have to be played by the mother and roles by the father. That one is agreed. But you raise an issue. You say some girls are defined by their own fathers. It's not because of the extent at which a father goes. In fact, for the reality bit of it, those who defer, in many cases, they are far from their children. Because if you are near with your child, they can even tell you, Dad, what are you doing? This is strange. I mean, if that close. But in the other instances, the little girl is subdued to give in. It's a directive, and which directive a girl has to accept. Right. So how far is relative? It depends. It depends. But of course, you must be aware that there are limitations, there are lines which you are not supposed to cross.
Okay.
But generally, many of the things with our children, we are fathers, we are parents. First of all, we need to create that kind of atmosphere which you talked about. These children have to be our friends so that they are free to tell us anything they wish to share.
Right.
Okay? And even these little girls know to what extent. If my child has a problem, maybe has a soil or what, you pick on me, they also know who should reach where.
Right.
You get to know. So we should have some kind of boundaries. Where we go and where we are not supposed to.
All right.
We are supposed to go. But in this, I need to sound this. in this COVID kind of situation. Like she shared, we need to be parents. It's an opportunity for us. Now, like she shared, to get to know our children and to get to know our roles as what? As parents. This framework we are talking about is a simple framework. In fact, many people are confusing it, think it's a textbook which you are going to read and get this many, get out of notes. No, it's a framework. This framework, there are implementers, and one of the implementers of the framework is the parent.
Right.
So it's just giving you what? Giving you guidance on the roles you are supposed to perform as a what? As a parent.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes. I like what Mr. Mlindo has said. You know, ever since Mr. Mlindo and I got to know each other in this discussion of the framework, I have read it a few times, but then every time I read it, I ask myself, but what is the problem? So today I read the framework. The framework is saying, as a parent, one of the key actors in the framework, tell your child who is 3 to 5 about their body and how to protect their body. So if anyone is opposed to the parent telling their child about their body and how to protect it, then clearly it's not that they're opposed to that. They have simply not understood. So perhaps our role is not to give up. Our role is to continue to say that as a parent, it is your responsibility and in your power to make sure that your girl child knows her body and knows the limitations of where she can touch and any other person cannot touch.
Correct.
And there should be no resistance to such kind of message, really.
Correct.
Yeah, and that can be by a parent, by a teacher, by a religious leader in any space. Thank you.
I think now that you're still speaking, as a father, now that we are still on that phase of fathers, a question has come through on social media and someone is asking, with this father-daughter, of course we'll be getting also, and I think it applies to also mother-son. Yeah. Most of us mothers have been accused that we are so close to our sons vis-a-vis our daughters, and the opposite is the same.
Absolutely.
So I wanted to speak to this question that is coming through. He spoke about that parent who, or that father who defiled their daughter is actually a parent who has not established a friendship with them. And she's asking, to what extent? Because there are also instances whereby the daughter now starts to develop, for a lack of a better word, feelings that are not genuine towards a father, but they start feeling like, I love my daddy, but not as a daddy.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question.
How do you handle that? And it's the reality on ground. There are families that are grappling with the same. Mothers who have to have such conversations with their daughters, who are telling them, but me, I feel this way towards daddy.
Yeah, I would want to respond, but I would prefer if you could get in some of the panelists online, because one of them is a parent and one of them is a religious leader. They could address some of this, but also in my own right, and going back to what Director Mlinda mentioned, I think that a parent, simply put. So as a father, you cannot claim that you got tempted, or you cannot claim that you did not know what to do. I think that is your cardinal role as a parent, to educate, to inform, to give the emotional support, to learn to acknowledge the views, the feelings of this child. You know, I think in most of our contexts, we don't acknowledge the feelings of young people growing up. We dismiss them. You know, many of us in our own time went through these romantic trials. But once we are adults, we actually think they didn't exist, or we did not ever resolve them. We just resolved them naturally by progressing, etc. So our first reaction when they are presented is to deny them. But I think in mental health development, acknowledging these feelings is like a starting point. Then you progress from there, redirecting them to where they should be, containing them, etc. Like the scenario of people say abstain. Abstaining is very good, 100% I support it, but you're not meeting the other party at the point where they are. You are telling a person who has a crush, who has advanced in many ways, to stop thinking about it and stop talking about it. you're blocking communication. Allow the communication to proceed and then give alternative measures of how this can be overcome. But I'd love to hear more from the other side as well, especially the parents.
Right.
Yeah.
Mr. Annette has been looking at me like, this one. Annette, I just want you to help a parent who's in that particular scenario. But before you get into that scenario, the ideal that these gentlemen are pointing out to is in a setting whereby wife and husband are working together. They're in agreement. There's peace in the home, right? So if there's a mother watching or a father watching who's saying that, but we are not collaborating, we don't even collaborate in other spheres as husband and wife, how do we even start on this journey? What would you tell them? Because now, today we want to move out of here and get out of here, having helped parents in different scenarios on how to go about dispensing sexuality education to their children. That scenario, what would you tell them? As a parent and a mother, as a wife as well. This time round is not about the curriculum.
Thank you very much, Mala. Just like James said, that we need to start at the point where we meet that particular, rather where the situation is. First of all, let us acknowledge that a man has developed feelings for the daughter.
Yes. And vice versa in some scenarios.
So one, we have to, first of all, agree to a fact that I remember when we were studying psychology, there is what they call the Oedipus Electra complex. I think that is there. It can be, it is possible for that situation to arise. But under such circumstances, I would refer, because for us in education, and where there is where we cannot do certain things, we do referrals. It could be a mental health problem, so I think we could refer to the health personnel, or we refer to social and psychological counselors, because to me as an individual, maybe as a parent, I may not have a particular solution at hand, but I would use a referral. If I were the wife in that particular context and I got to know, I would definitely make a referral, not through gossip, but professional. Right. Because we need to protect the image of the family.
Right. So if it's a parent in the rural area, do we say they first refer to a religious leader or something? Who can they go to? Because, of course, some of these referrals mean extra money.
Probably at that point you can refer to a religious leader.
Okay.
Because that is a situation that could really have gone out of hand. But just like as Ismail said, that the person, okay, much as it may be psychological, but then if it is to a level of abuse, then it means that there wasn't any kind of bond that was made between the parent and the child.
Okay. All right. Yes, Mr. Melindo.
Just wanted to add this, and I did make mention of it. Much as we are parents, if you are in a stable family, you must get to know your roles. They should be clear as a mother and as a what? And a father. I want to believe that where you have that kind of situation is where someone has crossed the line. You don't know where roles begin and what?
End.
And end. But if you know, I really find it very little odd to see a father dropping some for his what? For his daughter. It shouldn't happen. But it can happen depending on how. You know, the gap. Some of us have been teachers, and I've always been advising my fellow teachers. If you want to have problems with these little girls, you must create a gap. It doesn't mean you don't talk to these little girls, no. But you must have a gap. Like, for example, for some of us taught in schools, which were loud at the time, you would have girls coming to you and touching you, teacher, and you needed really to know how to handle this. These were, the terms were so hard, and these girls were in some of our schools.
Right.
But we tried as much as possible to put a gap, to get to know where and when, at what extent should I interface with this little girl?
Right.
What kind of conversation should I have? What kind of, so the details of the relationship will determine whether this father goes into that kind of thing or not.
Right.
But where you don't get to know the boundaries, and the boundaries doesn't mean you are not close with your children. But I gave an example here, which was a little casual, where I said, your girls are bathing, are doing what? Do you need really to go and check on them, and do you need to find out how they are bathing? Is it your responsibility as a father? This is the other side, who is supposed to. Because as a mother, you are supposed to know even how they bathe. You are supposed to know, to even guide, but not as a father. That's not your what? Right. That's not your role. So we need really to advise on even the roles of these different parents, the mother and the father.
Okay. Miss Faith Batega is with me online. Faith, I think I'll just get to you right now for you to help that parent or that family whereby the father and the mother no longer see eye to eye. And I think the advice you're going to give will also apply to a single parent, be it a single parent who's a man or a single parent who's a woman. He talked about, Mr. Mulindo talked about that division of roles when it comes to parenting and also helping the children with sexuality education. But if it's a mother and a father, a husband and a wife who don't see eye to eye, will they even sit down to start talking about, husband, this is where your role will stop, this is where my role will start? What is the solution for such a family? Because it's real on ground. Miss Faith, if you can hear me?
Yes, I wanted to say that even before we go to those families, I would like to re-echo that it is a role of both the parent as a father and a mother. Because even before those families that have issues, we have women who are not competent enough to speak to their girl children. We have men who are ever busy that they don't have time for children. So in either way, both parents should be able to break the barriers, speak to their children, because what I know, naturally, the girls like their fathers and the boys love their mothers, what we call the Oedipus complex under psychology. So I would want both parents to have the capacity to talk to either males or females as their children. We have homes under domestic violence, where men even don't come. We have single parents. So the issue of sexuality education is a call for every parent, whether a male or a female, because sometimes you find whom you think will do part X won't do it. But in a normal situation where both a man and a wife, that is a family, is very united, it is easier to handle. So we need to understand our children, which parent maybe is friendly to this one. And the man who came and told me that the daughter went into her periods and she told him, don't tell mommy. So the man was asking me, how do I tell her? I said, no, it is like this. You do it like this. Then after you let them. So it's a call for both parents in either way. So if you're a single mother, you have to put on the shoes of the would likely be the father. If you are a man who is in a home without a wife, the mother and father. What is important is information, like I've said. How do you clean your body? How do you bathe? What is expected of you? How do you treat yourself? How do you relate with others? I mean, which body parts you need to be conscious of, because you find a girl behaving like a boy behaving like a girl. So that is what we say, it must start from home, so that our children are better prepared for the future, so that we don't regret as parents.
Right. So do you agree, or is one of the situations or solutions for such a family whereby the couple is, you know, not in agreement, is one of the solutions, maybe one of the solutions that Annette gave, seeking help outside? Could that be a good solution for this? Maybe counseling, perhaps? All right, Faith, if you can hear me. All right.
Yes, now I can hear you.
All right. So we're talking about that which you've said is well done. But the question is, then if we have two people who are in the home, father and mother, of course, they're not being together is somehow affecting these children, even if it's young children, middle-aged children or teenage children, it affects them. And of course, like Mr. Ismail said, there has to be some collaboration whereby the father knows this is where I can stop, and the mother knows this is where I take my role up in terms of, you know, helping these children in sexuality education. So if you're having a family, a couple that doesn't see eye to eye or doesn't work together as a team, would you recommend counseling or seeking help outside as one of the solutions?
What I know, of course, as parents, we have to be more models. The moment we are not model enough to our children, that is where the problem begins from. But in either way, the right option should be bringing back hope in the home, because in circumstances we have seen where children take advantage of their father being away, the other one's taking advantage of the mother being, you know, without in a close relationship with the husband. So I would suggest to first reconstruct the home through counseling, so that the parents are able to realize the issues at hand and then reconvene back. Because in circumstances, I said, as a community development officer, children take advantage of the situation. When you are talking to the children, maybe they know you are the one who chased their father. They will ask you, what model are you? What are you telling us? So even you don't have the confidence, you don't have the self-esteem to talk to your children about this. So at the end of the day, when you have failed, then the children will fail. Those are the children who are saved by the mercy of teachers, relatives, and friends. But it is very, very important to first talk to the parents. You counsel them, they appreciate whatever has gone wrong. It can be corrected, what we call restoring hope. Then after they do their role, otherwise, the children may take advantage of the situation, and it will not be the best that we'd expect from such a home.
Right. Thank you so much, Ms. Faith. I think what she points out too is we've seen families whereby the father and mother are pulling from different directions, and the children are torn apart. They're them that are pro-daddy, pro-mommy, and in such situations, you wouldn't expect the parents to stand up to their role. I think I'll go to you, Mr. James, and as Reproductive Health Uganda, you know, looking at some of these realities on ground, especially during COVID-19 times, dispensation of sexuality education, where can parents start? I want you to speak to a parent, and the majority of them have never had these conversations with their children. And now they're with them at home. They have all this time, they're with them. Fine, we agree that the first point will be, let's break the barrier, let's be their friends. But where do they start? Do they start with classifying that I have a 2-year-old, 10-year-old, 18-year-old, and then now start working out the messages and the scenarios and the environments they can take advantage of to help them out? Where do we start? I want you to speak as an authoritarian, an authority from Reproductive Health Uganda, and you can also chip in your father heart.
I think the father heart would go first. Perhaps all of us here are on the different lines of parenthood.
Right.
My children are quite young. Yesterday I asked them, to make for me a presentation as I'm coming here. What should I say? My 5-year-old made for me a presentation and said that tell the children to prevent COVID, and listed for me the washing hands, reporting to daddy and mommy, going to the health facility. My 9-year-old, who is the oldest, did not have that kind of presentation. She's slightly shy and different. Last year, I think it was perhaps Mr. Mlinda or someone again, who there was someone in the studios where I had been, and they threw some statements. And my 4-year-old, who is now 5, very talkative, when we were having dinner, he asked me, Daddy, you said your friends are my friends. I said, yes. So he said, Daddy, your friend said young children are having sex. What is sex? He's 4 years.
Wow.
We're having supper. I struggled. I did not know what to say. I told him, I'll tell you at the right time. This is not the right time. So the following day, the same spot, having supper. That's when he's sure I'll be there. He asked me, Daddy, you said the right time. So what is it? So
Yes.
I was curious. After I said, after eating, let's talk about it. I asked him, why did you hear this? He said, your friends on the TV, they said it, and you are there. So I had to deconstruct myself from the professional I am to try and face a 4-year-old and tell them what this is in a fashion that does not break their innocence, but also that kind of does not break the trust that Daddy will tell me when I ask. I had to tell him, using quite many words, I could say, and telling him, when you grow older, you will learn about this. Mommy and Daddy will both tell you about this, and this is not something that you discuss at this time in your life. Many of your friends have even never heard about it. They don't know it, so don't ask them. When you have more questions, come back to me.
Right.
I will surely tell you. Then after that discussion, I was saying, okay, I am doing all this outside and I've not done it here. I began to deconstruct and begin to teach using the framework. The guy who was 4 years and the lady who was, I think, finishing her 7 years, to tell me about their bodies, each of them, and which parts of their bodies do what. And then I asked them to construct for me which part of their body they can allow an uncle or an auntie to touch. And they begin to show me. And then I tell them, uncle cannot touch this part. And they ask me why. I say that is for you alone, it's private. If when you have a problem with it, you want to tell 2 people. You tell Daddy, you tell Mommy. You know, deconstructing the whole body and using my local language, which they're not very good at, just to try and throw this into as firm as it can be. And when my girl, who is 9, went to school, I tried to go through her work and understand what she's studying. I began to deconstruct again to ask her if she has seen any body changes. And the boy, interestingly, came once he had me asking that, yes, Blessing has got breasts. It is not her telling me, but the brother is telling me.
Yes.
So you're trying to say, okay, what does that mean? And I'm telling her, this is meaning that in the next few years, you'll be a normal woman and a big woman. What it means is that now no one can touch your breast as well. This is, if you have a problem with it, you only tell Mommy. If I am not around, tell Mommy or me or something like that. Tell Auntie, ABCD with names, not just Auntie.
Right.
So that as much as possible, you're bringing the bond closer, but also saving your trouble of losing the confidence when the time to actually ask you comes. Because at 4 years, there are many things you don't expect the person to ask. But because they have had you, you know, in my house, my 2-year-old can put on the TV. My 5-year-old can put on the computer.
Without assistance.
Without any assistance.
Right.
His first attempt on using the computer, I asked him about internet. He doesn't know about it. When I showed him, he went to cars. He was able to Google cars, and he was able to see them. My 9-year-old, it is only in this COVID season that I have learned that she is very computer proficient, and I had no idea.
Wow.
Not knowing, but proficient.
Yeah.
And I had no idea that she was that good. So that means that leaving a computer which is connected to the internet to her can take her anywhere she wants. So it is until you deconstruct yourself to the level that you're willing to learn from the children and meet them where they are. I'm going back to that point. So the people who have older children could tell us.
Annette, I think you can chip in on this one from a mother hat. Fine. It's a parent, a mother or father watching us today, and they're like, no, I'm buddies with my children. But where do they start in terms of dispensing this information? Do they start with, like I said earlier on, categorizing them, that if I have 4 children, maybe they're this much years apart? How do I go about it?
Thank you, Maya. The information or the knowledge you give to an older child can be received by, yet, can be also be, okay, what I'm saying is that if you have a 4-year-old and an 18-year-old, it doesn't matter. You can discuss issues of the 5-year-old in the presence of the 18-year-old. But the most crucial thing, or the most important thing, is what I first talked about, is how do you break into that child's heart. The biggest problem that we have had as parents is we've been demanding academic progress, knowledge, good reports, good everything at the expense of everything else. Because the moment a report comes home, what did you get in math? What did you get in SST? What did you get in... And the children tend to look at us, parents, as people who only need
results, right?
Only results. So at this point, parents out there, we have kind of closed down also in education. So we need to first of all shelf that other bit about us and try to get into our children's lives. Many of the parents who are in the towns show a lot of love to their children. They give phones, they give, and remember, they also provide data and airtime. But they never ask themselves, what are the children looking at? What are they surfing? So that information they surf is actually so dangerous to them. And to them, that is what they imagine is sexuality education. So if you have the teenagers and pre-university, you need to get to them, talk to them, ask them, don't probe, but try to share. Because our children fear us because they know that we are always looking for mistakes. So let us try to, those of us with teenagers, let us try to befriend them. Let us try to visit the sites they visit. Let us do things together. That is how you can bring in this conversation. Because you have already lost it at a certain level. Because all you know is that I need results. And the child knows that this is... Now, there is also total lockdown via communication. So communication is key. So for those with younger ones, there is so much that we can do with young ones. And you just chip in these little things. They should be part and parcel of a daily conversation. I have a university student. He's actually a finalist, big man. And I made it a point, because I got this as a teacher. It was an experience that when I was still a high school teacher, a certain lady was reprimanded in my face, saying that my children, by a male parent, saying that my children don't do that. So look at what your children are. So by that time, my son was in nursery. So it came to my mind that the child belongs, when the child does wrong, I am responsible. The good kids are for the dad. That is the information, that is what I read from the guy. So I learned, this is a lesson I learned when my boy was 2 years. So I decided to befriend this boy as a child. And in each time, each moment, I used to drive my child to school. The environment was a learning. Wherever we passed, we would meet madmen, we would meet this, we would meet... And I would chip in and say, do you see that? He must have taken something that must have affected him, because that was what the child could understand as drug, maybe a part. So as he grew up, we grew closer and closer. And one day, I think he was in senior 3, there was a conversation on NTV about marital rape or something.
Yes.
So he boldly comes and asks me, Mommy, can actually a husband rape his wife? I was lost for words.
Yes.
But I had to find a way of talking to him in a way that could convince him so that I don't lose it, like he said. But, and being the teacher that I am, whenever I bring this conversation to my husband, he would say, but you're a teacher, you seem to know how to handle these children. Yeah. So I, not that he was running away from his responsibility, but he felt that I could do it. And I'm sure that, I think I have done it to a certain level. And I have helped some parents to understand their children. The most vital thing is to communicate to them. Don't give them, don't do this, you will do this.
Right.
So if you give it, if you come in, as you work, as you talk, as you converse, as you go to church, as you, everywhere, make it these sexuality issues a conversation other than a setting like this. Let us see, that will definitely be very boring,
right,
and it will scare them off and they will not pick anything.
Right. I think what I'm picking from you is that our children know so much.
They do.
So much. 4-year-old, huh? 3-year-olds. I have the 3-year-old. I have a 6-year-old, and the things they tell me, I'm like, okay. But we forget that they go to school, they interact with other children who are coming from different homes, and are exposed to different things. They watch TVs as well, they have phones as well. Mr. Ismail Mulindo, I want you to demystify, as we bring this conversation to a close, I want you to demystify some of the things that you've had parents say, adults for that matter, in terms of sexuality education. Just debunk those myths about sexuality education as we wrap this up. Of course, I'll take another round as we close this, but I just want you to point out to them and just tell us what the truth is and where the truth stands in all this.
There are quite a number of don'ts, but I just wanted to first of all say this point here. Like you rightly put it, we need to categorize. I didn't hear any of my colleagues here emphasizing this point. When we are giving this information, we need to categorize and get to know your children, the age brackets. There are some conversations you would have with your big ones and which may not bring you together. Like for me, incidentally, I don't have small ones. The small one I have is in senior 3. But when I'm talking to her, at times that conversation is our conversation. There are some general conversations we can have.
Right.
But then there are some specific conversations between me and her. And I have big ones who have gone to university, who have even competed. Like I have one, recently I was asking him, I had a grand who came to visit us, and when she left, the home was almost, we got, so I told this young man, I said, you have finished university, now you have started working, what are you waiting for? We need to have this little one in our courtyard. I said, Daddy, no, it's not yet time. I said, what are you waiting for? No, I need some time, I've not identified. And you can imagine we are that free and we could converse. And the other ones, the conversation would be a little different. But to go back to our concern, the don'ts, how do you demystify? Again, it starts with the kind of relationship you have.
Okay.
You have with
so that's
children.
critical.
Yeah, very, very critical.
Right.
You can ably demystify some of these by, and the child understands. But I mean, if you are not that close, you may not. Like, for example, I shouldn't see you with the boys in your company with the boys. Don't. No, when you start at that tone, you may not achieve what you want. But when you have created that kind of friendship,
Right.
it becomes easier, and the don't may not be the don't. The don't. Eh? You can simply say, yeah, okay, what are you doing? And when you are moving this way, and you make it a little lighter, so that you don't say, I shouldn't see you with the boys, I shouldn't do what.
Yeah.
Why next time I shouldn't see you putting on that dress. Then she may be comply at that time, but wait for that opportune time when you are not maybe around, when you have traveled, and now she will escape to go for a disco with her in her mini.
So what you're saying is that don't threaten them. Be part of their growth and experiences.
You discuss, why do you put on this? You know, when you put on this, it can cause you problem and this, and you understand each other.
All right.
You see?
Thank you so much. Mr. Nett, I give you 1 minute to do your lasting and closing remarks. But I also want you to speak to that bit. Do parents now have to, especially them that are older, like Mr. Mulindwa, do they have now to behave a certain way to be cool? Because I'm sure your kids have told, but mommy, I couldn't tell you that you're not as cool as we are. So speak to parents, your parting shot to parents, and touch on that a little bit. 1 minute.
Thank you, Mala. I think to the parents out there, one, we should be a role model to our children. We should listen to them. We should be part of their conversations. Let us not just rubbish them because they know so much. There are certain things that we don't know, but they do know. So let us learn from each other so that we can be able to give the right guidance. Try to know the whereabouts of your child, because I know there might be a parent there with a university student and you don't know who they are locked up with. Try to create that bond. Let us also instill in them, let's help them develop skills like decision making, being aware of themselves, refusal skills, whereby James comes to a child and tells them this and they say, no, I'm not interested, that it is not now. Then let us also try to encourage our children to develop skills like health seeking, security, knowing that they are very important. And to the fellow parents out there, we should always try to be there for the children.
All right.
Because the children are our future.
All right, be there for your children. Mr. James, I'm giving you a few seconds to close this. I want you to speak as a father and also from the Reproductive Health Uganda, because we're here courtesy of you guys. So 1 second or two for you to wrap this up. What do you tell parents this afternoon?
Thank you very much, Mala. It's unfortunate that the Reverend missed joining us. He's been struggling. But I would have wished to hear more also from that direction, to say that the whole issue of sexuality is something like Mulindwa began with, about the totality of the person. And each of us has a critical role to play to understand that we can pass on values in a manner that is respectful and cognizant of many other things. For those that have read the UN Child Rights Convention, the principle of the evolving capacities of the child is very, very important, to say that meet the child where they are, give them information that they need at the time that it is useful to them. And to me, I think that is very important. If all of us play our part and take into the evolving capacities of the child at that point, then this is something we can easily move together.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. At this point in time, before we close, I'd like to link to Reverend Moses. He was supposed to be part of the conversation, but I think he had a few technical hitches here and there, but I hear he's with us now. Reverend, do let me know if you can hear me. Brilliant, we have you now. Reverend, I want you to, now that we're closing, we have just a few minutes to close this. I want you to speak to the parents. as a religious leader, why is it important for them to take on this role as seriously as possible? Because for a majority, they'll tell you, number one priority in their priority list is, I need to provide for my children. I don't want them to be, to drop out of school or to go hungry. But they have forgotten about this critical issue that the children are also growing. So as a religious leader, I want you to speak to that. You have a few seconds to go. Reverend, can you hear me?
I'm Reverend Modesem Goma. I think you hear me very well.
Okay.
I'm a parent as well as a religious leader. So from that perspective, I speak as a religious leader as well as a parent. It is really very important to understand the role of a parent as well as a religious leader in this pandemic period and after the post-lockdown. So it is very important that we understand that our young girls and boys really undergo through different stages, and if we don't understand clearly these development stages, then we cannot fail to understand how to communicate to them. But what is very important as religious leaders is we need to understand the dynamics of communicating the right messages to the right people. What is important in this is that young girls and young boys, as they grow, they tend to interact with different people, and you find that sometimes these people they interact with have different feelings, they have different characteristics, they have different beliefs. And what is important is we, the religious leaders, to come out openly to speak to them, because if we don't fail to come openly to speak about issues that are disturbing these people, then they will not be helped. And it is our role as religious leaders to create supportive environment for youth to ask and also receive accurate information during such a pandemic period. So in most cases, I had my colleague earlier who said that defilement, most cases, happens outside homes. But for me, I would strongly say that even in our homes, we find that defilement happens, and it is our responsibility to speak to our children what causes defilement, how can these young children avoid being defiled, because if they don't understand the dynamics and the consequences of that will come out, then at the end of the day, we shall push the brain to them when actually we did do our part. And also, in this period, we as religious leaders, we need to guide young people to make positive and responsible productive decisions. Educate young people about their physical growth, HIV and STI prevention, as well as handling the myths and facts about sexuality education. I know sexuality education is a contentious issue when it comes to religious circles, but what is so important is to understand how do we communicate effectively, because this is very critical. And as a religious leader, I would strongly say that Paul talks about the unclear messages in 1 Corinthians 14, and he illustrates this using the musical instruments. Musical instruments produce sounds that you can understand the importance of communicating. So it is very, very important to have a common understanding at home, because this is where the problem begins. Because the mother could say, would like to speak to girl children, and also the husband say, I'm speaking to boy child.
All right.
So that one creates sometimes imbalances in parenting.
Thank you so much,
as a good parent, I would suggest that it would be very important for both parents to take their roles, because these are their children. They need to look after them. They need to help them and support them to grow well.
Thank you so much,
also,
Reverend.
we also look at the Bible says there is time for everything, and a lot of time cannot be regained when it is lost. So these body changes happens differently. But when you find these times that now parents have not been, some parents have not been having their children at home, and now this is a learning lesson because they have been sending them every time.
Right.
During the holiday, they send them to their aunts. During whatever, they send them to school for coaching, and also they are in hostels, they are in boarding schools, and you find that they don't have time for their children. Now, this one brings us back to our role as parents to look after our children, but as well as to help them become responsible citizens.
All right. Thank you so much,
Because
Reverend.
we may, I was looking at the statistics here in our district, Mitiana. We
Yes.
identified that 13% teenage girls have been.
Thank you so much, Reverend, for your submission. Unfortunately, we're having hitches with your connectivity, so we couldn't hear you clearly, but thank you so much. I think that the heavy point that you're giving out is parents need to be available. Parents need to wake up to their role. And so I'd like to thank you all who have been part of this conversation. The big hashtag this afternoon was, of course, hashtag Sexuality Education UG. And we thank you so much for, of course, dropping in your questions, comments, suggestions. The panelists will be able to look at those and respond. Promise? Yes, all right. So they pledge that they will look at those and respond to the same. Hashtag Sexuality Education UG. We were live right here on MTV Uganda. Across all our social media platforms. We're also live on KFM 93.3, live on 93.9, that was Namirembe FM. And of course, we're hosting this e-conference via Zoom for our different viewers and followers across the regions and different countries alike. So we salute you. As a parent, you now have the ABCs. You have no excuse. These are your children. They are your responsibility. Have those conversations with them. But how about you start with being their friend? Thank you so much. My name is Malaki Villa-Odera. Of course, the CEO, founder, Silmax Consultant, the moderator for the afternoon. We salute you. Let's continue talking. And parenting is our role.